I took care of the babies at 10. I'm thinking that my son is 11. I'm like, I would never leave him with six babies.
Honestly, the haters can hate. Just let the creators create and let the creator be judged. I mean, too many mistakes to be grudging. Besides, all of us lost without love. Cause maybe some never get woke, or tired of staying awake, or party all night then distraught at the state of the day.
Hi everyone, I'm Stacey Lee Kong, and this is Friday Talks Not Bad For Some Immigrants, a video series about the immigrant experience and what that even means. And today we're talking about immigrant daughter syndrome, which is not a real diagnosis. But if you are from an immigrant family or you love someone who is, you probably know what I'm talking about. And I'm very excited because joining me today are filmmaker Vinta and the founder of fashion brand Vinta Gallery, Carolyn Mangosing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What is the first time that you remember feeling responsible for something in your family or in your home? Okay, I can go first just so that you give me time to think. Which is that when I was 7, my dad had an aneurysm, and I remember thinking, like, I have to be good. I have to get good marks, and I have to be good because that is how I will like contribute to this home. And then my brother was born when I was 13, and then I felt responsible for this like whole human. So pretty young either way. What about you two?
My mom ran like a kind of illegal daycare.
Yes, I know the type.
When we moved to Los Angeles from the Philippines, she was taking care of all of the nurses' kids. And so there was 6 of them under 3. I was 10 years old, and I had to take care of all of them at the same time after school when my mom would leave to go to grocery store. And I just jumped into the playpen with them. I took care of the babies at 10. I'm thinking that my son is 11. I'm like, I would never leave him with 6 babies. It's unreal.
It's a lot of babies.
It's a lot of kids. Yeah, I changed diapers. I did all that stuff.
You made sure they were safe?
Yeah.
They weren't like falling off of furniture?
We all took naps in the playpen. I just jumped in because I was still small.
Because you were small.
You were still a child.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in therapy, so I'm still trying to figure out where I remember maybe the memories that I blocked out.
Yes.
But I think I was also raised very much like there was not like a gender norm between my brother and I. Like we weren't forced to prescribe to particular gender roles, which I appreciate from my dad especially.
Yeah.
But I think when my mother got sick, my mother's battled cancer twice now. So the first time in 2015 when she got sick, the first time with breast cancer, which she beat, that was the first time I felt responsible in a very real and non-negotiable way.
Yes, that totally makes sense. I feel like, and the reason I ask that is because I think for a lot of us, it happens eventually. Like, if it doesn't happen when you're really small, it happens when you're older. So there are definitely lots of great internet memes about oldest daughters in particular, or immigrant kids of all genders. But there's something about being the eldest immigrant daughter, or in that role, because before we were talking about, like, you may not be chronologically the eldest, but there is an eldest role. And so, Carolyn, I wanted to ask you about those obligations and expectations. Like, why do you think it's so common? We are all from different cultures. Why do you think it's so common to have that happen?
I mean, I think in general, the baby boomers didn't really miss the manual on how to raise children in general. And then on top of that, being an immigrant, having colonial mentality, and moving to North America, and so many things, right? And then I think that, I don't know, I think they just missed the boat on understanding what that is. And then there's also the kind of like, well, you're fine, and you're smart, and you're independent, and you're sassy, so we're gonna make you responsible.
Right.
I'm not the eldest, I'm the middle, but I was that.
Yeah.
The sassy one who knew everything.
You could handle it.
I could handle it, but then it was like the support wasn't given, right? It's like, you're responsible for everything, we're not supporting you because you're so sassy.
Right. You're expected to handle it because of your personality.
Yeah, the personality kind of trumped the, oh, you don't need care.
Whether you have the capacity.
That's it. But okay, so this leads me to the next thing, which is I think some of this is the expectations that get put on us. And to your point, there's also the practical part of it, right? Like if you don't necessarily have the money for a babysitter or you don't necessarily have the resources, then you have to lean on the resources available to you. And often it's just like your family. It's just us. So I do think that's part of it, even though that's not every immigrant's experience. But I also find that I lean into the role. Like I like the act of caring for people, and I get something out of that as well. So it's not just like obligations and expectations that are put on me. It's also the ones that I'm like, yeah, give me those, give me that. I try to be clear about dual motivations. Like even saying the word obligation makes it sound like it's a thing that I'm being forced to do, and it's not that. Like I want people to understand, especially if you don't come from an immigrant background, to understand that it's also a thing that I want. So I'm curious, and VT, do you feel that push and pull? Especially because you are a filmmaker and like living a creative life and doing something that's very demanding of your time and your energy, but also in this caregiving role with your mom.
You're a Pisces, that's what I feel like. I'm a Pisces rising.
It's a lot of feelings.
I watched this thing the other day. This incredible creator, online creator, Candice Brathwaite from the UK.
I love her.
Yeah, and she was in her car, and I started crying because she was crying, and she had just gone to the dentist, and somebody had the dentist had rubbed her head and held her hand, and she's a grown woman. She has 2 kids. She's married. But you're a grown woman and you're still also the child inside of you, right? Yeah. Like both are true. And she was just talking about people with a mothering spirit or like a nurturing spirit, if you don't want to make that gender specific rather. So I thought about that and that resonated with me. And then I was like, why did this concept of mothering resonate for someone like me who has chosen not to have children as well?
Right.
I think when I'm thinking about my family, there is this push and pull. I think it's a very strange experience when you are a young daughter of immigrants, particularly racialized immigrants, and you're not raised with specific gender roles. Like, I was not raised to cook or clean or take care of my brother in a specific way. We were taught to just be there for each other. But there is a sense as I've gotten older, I think part of it is the push and pull is I'm also on this healing journey with my elders, particularly my parents. And as our relationship has gotten better and we've addressed hard things, I think living with them in the pandemic made that very real.
Yes.
But there is a desire that I have to take care of them. I'm an artist, like you said. I live at home still. I'm 35. Do with that what you will.
Girl, the economy, okay?
It's beautiful and hard, and they're better roommates than I would find elsewhere. But at the same time, it's a struggle, but they have always made space for me being an artist. They have always supported it. Sometimes financially have supported that in so many ways. And so I feel indebted to them. And again, not an obligation, but indebted because I am who I am because of them. I've been privileged to have parents like that.
Yes.
And so now I feel like a rite of passage that I'm embracing where, as I move forward in my career, even when I go to meetings, I go to director for hire meetings and writer for hire meetings, I say I have to retire my parents. I want to retire my dad. And so nobody's actually going to work harder than me.
That's the thing.
So I'm here and I'm showing up and I have a reason to. The same way people show up and they have children or they have children and elders at the same time. I have family members who are caregiving for both. I can't even imagine. I can barely get around just 2 elders, right?
And yourself.
And myself. So it is a push and pull, like you said, but I think it's a privilege to have this kind of relationship with my parents. I know many friends and peers who don't necessarily have that support, and so I totally understand where they don't want to have that obligation or feeling.
Yeah.
For me, I can see where it impacts certain parts of my life, but the good outweighs the challenging, for me, personally.
I love that too because I have often felt indebted to my parents. I know that they chose a much harder life for me and for my brother, although he was born here. So we moved, really, it was for me. And so I definitely feel that, you made these choices to give me a better life. And so I want to give you, I want to pay that back.
Yeah, I think also my parents are refugees, so that's a very specific experience, being displaced, having no homeland to go back to. Life is here, right?
Yeah.
So my parents, yes, in some cases within the Tamil community, because that's where I'm part of, people did make those choices. My parents didn't come here married or with children. They came here to escape, you know, conflict. And so there is a different experience, I think, being displaced, knowing that my parents can't go home, they can't build a house, they can't return to their homes. They didn't get to see their parents pass away. They're like very real traumas that they still live with. And so that's also part of my sensitivity to them, is like the result of also being displaced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's such a good point. So jumping off of the point that you were making about gendered roles within the home, because I don't know that I was raised to be a wife or a mother. Like that's not necessarily, that wasn't anyone's goal. My goal was always, and I think my parents were very ambitious in their dreams for me about achieving what I wanted to achieve, but gender roles did show up. And so this kind of makes me think of this question of, when we're thinking about immigrant daughter syndrome, is it about community care, or is it also sort of this like holdover of patriarchal requirements for women to just take care of people? Like, do you think it is one or the other? Is there an interplay? Like, what do you think is happening there?
I think it's both. For sure, it's both.
Yeah.
But I think that the part that we're all from racialized communities and immigrant communities, it's like we have to be community facing for us to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the beautiful thing about being from an immigrant community. But then, of course, they're all kind of patriarchal. And there is that, like, we get more than our fair share of having to do the emotional labor for everybody. But I think that generation now, like my husband, for example, it's like he's so flipped. Like he does all the cooking, he does all the a lot of the emotional labor.
Because you did it. You're like, I'm actually tired. I'm not doing this right now.
I'm not
had
crying.
a whole baby.
You cried.
Yeah.
I had the baby, and it's like I had to slice my stomach open. It's what you got to do. Cook for
fair
me.
Is fair. Fair is
yeah.
fair.
So in my in my life now, it's worked out that a lot of the men, like even my sister's husband, does a lot of the cooking, and so there's a little bit of kind of evening out in that sense. But then we still have that beautiful immigrant community-facing culture, which is a positive thing.
I think I'm just building off of what Caroline said. I think it works when all folks, regardless of gender, believe in community care, right?
Right. The people who are closest to me, I don't think there's anyone who does not check in on me, who does not show care. And like that has been, I think, the lesson of this year, is that the people who love me the most are the people who are going to keep me in their hearts and in their minds. And that receiving care is like a huge part of healing. And being able, like the reciprocity, so being able to give care and receive is actually kind of life-changing.
Yeah.
Carolyn, do you, when you're thinking about, especially because you are one of those people that is caregiving, like you have a kid who you are responsible for, a whole human, but you also have this like role that you play in your family. How does that work for you?
It's like I am the total opposite of Nayani, because my parents actually left Canada when I was in college.
Right.
And the difference with me is like I don't get along with both my parents, and I was like physically, emotionally, mentally abused, and I called the police on my dad. So I was disowned for a period of time.
Yeah.
But then I was like the one that they relied on to take care of my two other sisters.
Right.
So they didn't really talk to me except to check in that I was taking care of them.
Yes.
Like you have to live with your older sister because she never left home when they were moving back to the Philippines in the 90s, right? So there was that, and it's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And it's a little bit like, because you expected that I was so rebellious, you expected me to fuck up my life. Yeah. But then now I'm in this position where you're expecting me to take care of everyone.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's a little bit like out of spite. It's like, I'm doing it out of spite because it's like y'all kind of thought that I wasn't gonna be able to do anything. And now I'm the one that's taking care of
doing it.
everybody.
And I also think like a big motivation for this theme, like the theme of immigrant experiences, is to complicate the narratives that we constantly are surrounded by. And so I think it's really useful and important to remember that like not everyone is going to feel a sense of obligation, and it's going to be one that we embrace. And like that is also so valid and so real. And it is part of this conversation. Like the obligation is there, and so many of us feel it, and we all have different feelings about it.
Yeah. No, there's a very real value, a Filipino value called utang na loob, which is like the debt of your soul, basically. And everyone is supposed to kind of lock into that. And that's how you take care of your family. You have utang, like you have a debt to your family, right? I'm always like, I have no debt. I have no debt, but doesn't mean that I'm not gonna do
what this thing is.
What it is and what I need to do or what I clearly see that is needed.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, so I wanna then go in a little bit about like the impact of being adultified or parentified in this way. Because I think there are some impacts. So like, it doesn't just show up in the way that we relate to our families or to our parents. I think it also shows up in like the way that I live my life just in general, how I show up for my friends, how I show up in romantic relationships, how I even show up at work. And so I'm curious for both of you how this sort of immigrant daughter experience maybe goes into other parts of your life. Or does it?
I don't know. I feel like despite not being raised in a very particular gendered way, I became a doula. I teach yoga to prenatal, like
care is part of how you go through life.
Yeah, and I think even how being the director and being like a mom, like regardless of your gender, it's a very mothering role, because I think people might say it's like a fathering role, and this is very gender specific, and I don't mean to be that way, but if we look at traditional kind of like expected roles, it's very much like a mothering role, because you have to answer to people's emotions, you have to calm people down, you got to keep yourself calm, you got to talk to actors, you got to talk to crew, you got to make sure the producer has like, it's just this very, and even producing, you know, just those two roles on set. So I don't know, like I find myself in very that's my nature, I can see aspects of that, but I do question at this stage, like how much of that is socialization and how much of it is like just also who I am.
I was just thinking that as you said it. Like I also naturally go towards some of those roles, and it's not necessarily not in filmmaking, just like just to be clear, but like I do think it's hard to tell how much of it is nurture and how much of it is just who I am and how much of it is socialization. Like for us, gender roles were a thing, and I don't think there was never an expectation that I was being trained to be a wife or a mother, but there were still things that I was expected to do that my brother is not expected to do. Like it's just not the same approach. And it's hard to tell. Like, it's hard to unpack it. It's not necessarily just one thing.
I mean, my parents like still don't want to know if I'm dating someone unless I'm like want to marry them.
Okay, Carolyn, going over to you. Does the immigrant daughter idea, does it show up in other parts of your life, do you think?
Well, I started a whole Filipino cultural center that was youth-focused. So I did that for a decade.
Okay.
It was like really it was mostly for me to try and undo what happened to me.
Right.
And be that person that I needed when I was young. Like, I didn't know that until in retrospect.
Yes, of course.
It's like, oh, I was so focused on doing this and providing the space for young people, young Filipinos, And then I realized after, I was like, oh, in therapy.
Therapy is great.
We met because she wasn't just doing it for Filipino kids. Like, we were trying to start another group we're two South Asian girls trying to set up an organization as well.
Yes.
So that's how I met Caroline like 15 years ago, like sitting down, like, I'll help. So like just helping everybody.
Totally. So, I mean, that's the thing. And now I think I'm like a very reluctant mothering of my parents.
Yeah.
It's reluctant, but it's like I have to do it.
But it's happening.
So I do it through, my aunt and my uncle. It's like, oh, your mom needs this. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and deal with that.
Yeah.
But it's still always me.
What you're saying though makes me think about, I don't think it's all bad. Like I don't think, and I don't want it to sound like I'm unhappy with immigrant daughter syndrome, although I called it a syndrome, which is like obviously pathologizing it. I think like I learned important skills that I wouldn't have learned necessarily. I think I take some of those skills into other parts of my life. I don't think it's bad to think about how we can show up for the people that we love, but even if you're doing it not reluctantly at all, there are still like sometimes negative impacts. Like I still sometimes think about how do I keep those good things and bring those forward into how I live my life and how I maybe model behavior for others while also letting go of the parts that could potentially hurt. Like, I think some of this for me is also about unlearning the idea that I should subsume my needs. So I'm curious from both of you, how do you do that? How do you keep the good parts and maybe let go of the parts that weren't as good for you?
There's the space thing, like taking your own space, having boundaries, and it wasn't just with my own family that I realized that my boundaries were too loose. you know, it's with everyone, because then it's like, oh, you want to give what you didn't get, like for me anyway. And then it's like, oh, I was getting taken advantage of, and, you know, that kind of thing. And it was just like a crazy pattern that I had to break.
And recognize.
And it's like, it's still a journey. I'm hitting 50 next year, and it's like, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to figure out, oh, I did it again.
Yeah.
With, you know, like somebody younger, or with like somebody's asking my help. I did it too much to my detriment, right?
Yeah.
So it's that idea that it's constantly trying to be conscious of like, how much can you give without giving up what you need, right?
I think especially as a parent, I'm interested in hearing about that, because you also want to, or I would imagine that you would want your child, regardless of gender, to learn those good parts, but also, like, sometimes I think it's easier to be like, well, I don't want this person who I love to subsume themselves.
Yeah. Now I'm just like, okay, you need to vacuum, you need to do laundry, and I'm trying to teach him all these. He's an only child.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, maybe if I yell at him and then apologize later, he'll have the balance.
Right.
I don't know. It's
But
like
it's like
hard.
There's no roadmap. Like, okay, well, baby boomers, they threw out the manual, but there actually isn't a manual.
No, there isn't.
Like, there's no rules.
But we're
There's
more
no-
conscious, and
Yes.
we're more self-aware, like 200% more self-aware.
At least 200% more.
At least, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm just hoping that because I'm able to apologize
Yes.
and recognize where I went wrong, and as an 11-year-old, my son can see it,
Yes.
you know, and then he can kind of volley back and forth and have the conversation of the fight that we just had.
Yeah.
You know, so like, I'm hoping that's enough.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
We're doing our best.
Yeah.
BT, what about you? I know that it's maybe a more recent journey. Like, you're not necessarily, you don't have the distance of decades, but are you thinking about what the good parts are?
I mean, I think I do have the distance of decades, just like now that I'm starting to acknowledge it. So
Right.
there has been this my whole life, for
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
because, you know, in my larger family, there was substance abuse, there was domestic violence, like so many things that happen within, I think, not that it's an excuse, that's a whole different conversation, but a traumatized community comes with so much baggage and issues that are pervasive and continue even when you leave, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that I shouldn't have seen and witnessed as a child and had to reconcile with and work through. And as an adult now, like, it's such an interesting place to be with my parents, because I think I'm still going through caregiving and being parented at the same time. So we're like parenting each other, which is like also very healing and a very specific kind of journey. And I'm negotiating that at this point in my life, while also like taking steps away. And what does that look like for me at this age versus if I left when I was like 21 when I wanted to, you know? And that's another conversation, is like, what does the caregiving aspect of life, or, you know, watching your parents age as adult children, you know, how do you start to heal that part? Because you're just starting to heal from your childhood.
It's just always healing. And I used to think, and this is, obviously I needed therapy, but like, I used to be like, I don't have an inner child. I'm fine. Like, whatever happened in the past happened in the past. And it has been annoying, but important to understand that that's not actually the case, and that things that have happened to you in the past might have an impact on you. Which is, you know, basic, but here we are. But it is that also part of the struggle is navigating the fact that there's always going to be stuff.
And I think you said something which I'm remembering as I go through the depths of therapy at this time in my life. Whoever your elders are, whether it's your parents or grandparents, whoever raised you, whoever did not raise you the way you deserve, whatever the context may be, so part of the healing and letting go has also been remembering that they are also children inside.
That's it. It's okay, as you said that, you know, the first time where you realize, oh, your parents are people outside of being your parent? That moment where you're like, oh, and you also have an inner child and maybe didn't get what you needed or have trauma.
And I know they didn't, because I asked. And I hear the stories and I'm like, okay, you definitely did better than you got. Like, you definitely did better by us. And not that that's an excuse for what we've been through, but like, definitely better than what you came from. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too. Like, I was talking with a bunch of other friends, and it's like World War II trauma for baby boomers No one has ever talked about it. The Philippines was decimated.
Yes.
So I don't know what was going on in their childhood.
That's it.
As they were coming out of the war and they were toddlers.
Yeah.
And like, what were their parents
What were they seeing? What
I don't
were they
even
absorbing?
know.
And even just the idea, this sounds so woo-woo, but it's not. It's science that like, we don't need to be conscious of what we are absorbing or conscious of what is happening around us for it to impact us.
Yeah.
We have genetic trauma. That's a whole different conversation, right?
Yes.
But like,
And they didn't get the memes.
no,
They did
that we
not
have.
get the memes.
No,
No.
that we didn't. That we could feel a little less alone.
Yeah, to talk about healing and to really recognize all of that kind of stuff. So
Even when if I talked to my mom about things, not that she's averse to it, but she's like, like my dad's a Scorpio, so he doesn't. I don't know. We could take.
I don't know. I just don't know.
Like he'd like, okay, that's your language, basically. That's not mine. I don't. Why am I gonna do that? I'm 70 something, whatever. I think part of being like this immigrant child syndrome, regardless of gender, if you are that role in your family, you're also healing, your body. You're going through things internally as you're dealing with the emotional and mental and, physical stress of life and what you've been through. I just want to live somewhere quiet and have somebody to go to IKEA with. I just want to be grounded in a particular way. I don't want to have a responsibility to everybody. I do want to be cared for and nurtured. I'm also at a point in life where I'm I'm tired of nurturing and caring for everybody else, whether it be my, friends or family or lovers or partners, whatever it might, or work folks, peers. I'm just trying to be what does it mean to be cared? What does it mean and feel like to be cared for myself? And that's what I'm trying to prioritize is who's out here to have a mutual relationship in any context where we mutually show up for each other is a really important question I'm asking of myself and those around me and that I love. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel I know we went in several different directions in this conversation, which is not unusual for me, but I do think it really does all relate back to what do we think we can have and what do we think we deserve? And how much of that is us learning for ourselves that we are also deserving of care. We are also deserving of reciprocity. We don't have to hard work ourselves into being loved. We don't actually have to do that.
But that's always been the premise.
I was gonna say, that's the premise, and also that's been my default. I can just,
that's the default.
I can accomplish anything through hard work.
Yeah.
And it has been a mind fuck to be actually.
I'm gonna write that down. It really has always been the premise. It's the foundation.
It's been the foundation. It's people think I'm an overachiever or whatever, but it's I've just been trying to get validation from my parents so that they can recognize my
your value and your
my value is based on how much money I've made, that I bought a house, all of these things, and it's and now it's on Facebook that I have this company. It's that's
well now and now you're getting the validation.
Yeah, and then I don't even still get it personally.
No, because that's not actually how we come to that.
It's I have to overhear it, them talking to somebody else, showing me off, but they'll never say it to me.
Yeah. Before I let you both go, is there any final thought or anything that, if you're talking to other immigrant daughters, and I think specifically, if we're talking to our people, what do you want us to remember?
I'm in the mirror every morning being you did it. Keep going. I love you.
Self-validation.
Self-validation.
Yeah.
And also just pick your people carefully. We don't always get to pick the people we were born into this world with, and that is complicated, and we don't represent the full breadth of what people have experienced. But picking your people, whether it's
having your own village,
having your village,
creating that village,
and nurturing your village,
curating that village to make sure that you're taken care of too, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much. This was such a good conversation. Before I let you go, where can people find you?
_9, the number 9, and knee, KNEE, your knee.
Love it.
I'm at Vinta Gallery.
And Friday Things is at @_Friday Things, or you can go to www.fridaythings.com/subscribe to sign up for the newsletter. And as always, comment, share, do all the things. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for watching.
Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. Get it, get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it. I'm talking about ways we can elevate. Stepping up, staring, we escalate. Don't try to separate, we'll get together and celebrate. I can do everything, I just don't hesitate. I can do anything. Allow me to demonstrate. I just can't wait, I just cannot be me. I just can't go back.